do have people who are not able to join us live, and we want to have them be able to get access the same information later. So just wanted to let you know that we'll be recording. So we have, what we're going to do tonight is have 3 topics that we'll cover. The first one is going to be about filling vacant board positions that you might have at your school. The second is about doing community building online in this sort of virtual environment that we are all in right now. And the third is about creating provisional budgets for the next year. And so we're going to spend about 20 minutes on each topic. And so I'm going to be monitoring the time and letting everybody know in the chat box. And I'll probably jump in when conversation is getting towards 20 minutes that we're going to move on to the next topic. So you'll know. And when we get into the general conversation, we'll all unmute people so you can jump in, but you can also use the chat box. So if you have never used Zoom before, which I'd imagine lots of people are getting used to it, but if you haven't used Zoom, if you hover over your the bottom of your screen, you'll see a bunch of icons, and there is one that says chat, and that will bring up a little box to the right side of your screen, and you can just type a message or a question there if you don't want to speak out. The other thing you can do to let us know that you're interested in speaking is raise your hand. And so if you click in the same bottom of your Zoom screen, you'll see a participants icon. If you click on that, the list of everybody who's on this call will pop up in the right-hand side, and you'll be able to hover over your name and raise your hand, and I will be monitoring that to see if there are people who want to speak. And then you'll be able to unmute yourselves and speak. And let's see, what else do I want to tell you? When the meeting is over, I'll make sure everybody's unmuted, and if there's any sort of informal chat that you want to have as we're leaving the meeting, then you can do that. All right, so at the end, actually, let me just tell you right now also about next week. Next Wednesday night, same time, 7:30, we're going to be doing a town hall with our state legislators. We have Senator Scott Wiener, Assemblymember David Chu, and Assemblymember Phil Ting, who are all going to be joining us and talking about the latest going on with the budget at the state level, with any legislation they're working on that's related to families or education, and then anything related to COVID response that you might have questions about. And I'll post that in the listservs tomorrow just to give you a reminder of what the link is. And a great thing to do would be for you all to post questions when you register for the meeting, because I will be sending them all questions ahead of time so they're prepared to bring you the information you're looking for. So that should be a great opportunity, and one that you should feel free to share with all of your members at your school and teachers and your whole school community, because I think a lot of people will want to take advantage of that. So with that, we are going to get started. So like I said, the first topic we're going to cover is how to fill vacant positions on your board. And Melissa Mountain, who is our parliamentarian for the district PTA, is going to start us off, and then we would love to hear from you, things that have been working for you, and we will also try to give you ideas, and Melissa's going to lead that part, and we'll do that for probably about 20 minutes, maybe a little bit less, and I'll let you all know when we're coming to the end so we can switch to our next topic. But Melissa, you want to go ahead and take it away?
Sure. Thank you, Michelle. It's nice to see all of your faces again. I will get right into it. We're talking about how to fill vacancies for next year's PTA officers. And so this is a question that is always somewhat difficult. Each year we get questions about this, and it's just made that much more difficult with the stay in place. We're not meeting people, we're not running into people as often, so all of this just becomes even harder with recruitment. But let me just do a little bit brief overview of the process for finding new officers for next school year. It's the parliamentarian on your board that will call the nomcom, so I'll refer to the nominating committee as the nomcom sometimes. There are very detailed outlines and question and answers on capta.org if you're not familiar with the nominating committee process. It's all outlined on there, or you can reach out to me if you have questions about that. Yes, you can be, the parliamentarian can be on the nominating committee themselves. Some people don't realize that. They just have to be elected just like anyone else, but they can serve. The only person that can't be is the current president, cannot be on the nominating committee. And then also those that are members on the nominating committee, they can also be on the slate. They're not excluded from serving on next year's board. So those are two common misconceptions.
And Melissa, can you just let people know what to do if they don't have a parliamentarian on their board?
I believe you can, well, for any meeting, if you don't have a parliamentarian, you can assign someone to help you run the meeting. The board, I don't know if that's official, maybe Terry can say if it, but if you don't have a parliamentarian, still the nominating committee members need to be selected and voted by the membership. Now, I'll start talking also about the fact that I know some of us are just behind on the timeline, and I'll talk about the timeline because of stay in place a little bit too. But in general, this is the general process that if you have a parliamentarian, you would have the nominating committee approved by your membership, and they would start this process of recruiting. And you check your bylaws for how many members. It's usually 3 or 5 plus an alternate. The alternate doesn't serve on the nominating committee unless someone has dropped out or can't serve. And so the timing, as I mentioned, has all just become a lot more difficult with stay in place. You're just canceled events, you're not having big meetings at school or assemblies and running into people. So another thing I've heard is just it's taking time to have interviews with people, to talk to people, just to set up virtual meetings. That's taking a lot more time as well. So those are some of the difficulties we're hearing with just even setting up conversations and moving along this process. But whether it's now during the pandemic or anytime, I believe that it's best to do one-on-one talking with people, just asking them directly. You can send out, and you should send out on your email listservs that you're in this process and that you're trying to recruit for which roles, but it really comes usually down to the speaking with people one-on-one to do the recruiting. Another really important thing, regardless of the pandemic or not, is to involve your principal. The bylaws, you'll see that the principal is always an advisor to the nominating committee, so they're always a part of your recruitment process, and they can be really helpful with that. So don't leave your principal out, and the principal often has other ideas that you may not have thought about for finding members. You want to try to find new people. As you probably know, it's just that you can't serve more than 2 one-year terms, and they want to see the turnover in your leadership. It helps keep a healthy PTA going. And also on the nominating committee, you can only serve once, and then you have to take a break, and then you can serve again. But you want to try to find some new people. At my son's middle school, for example, it was really helpful. Our PTA president wrote a very detailed list about and each officer could do this, to share what the responsibilities are, how much time it takes. So letting people, being really clear and transparent about what the role involves, helps with recruitment. And then if that's not working to find new people, you can also look at typical places, like maybe someone on your SSC would like to be more involved with the PTA, look at room parents and other school volunteers. And don't forget about incoming parents. They do need to be a member for 30 days before they can become an officer, but sometimes some roles like secretary or historian, or even just a financial assistant, this financial secretary, you can still find people to fill those roles in the fall when new parents come in. And if you can't find anyone, this does happen, and it's just you haven't been able to, it is really important that the current officers stay involved in order to have important documents prepared, because all the taxes and all that will come up. So if you don't have someone, you just want to make sure that you don't abandon your PTA unit. So because we're in May, a lot of people already have done this process, but you still have time if you haven't. I know the bylaws say that you need to have done it by a certain time, but these are unusual times, and we're all doing our best. So if you haven't done that yet, you can still pull it together. You can still announce 30 days in advance that you're going to have an election. And if you don't have a slate to propose, you can still try to recruit people in that time and be able to announce them a little bit earlier before the meeting, but you can still hold your election. So those are just some of the basic things and some ideas. other people that have had a lot of experience with PTA want to add their suggestions for about ways to find people, I can get off mute and add those ideas. Or if people have questions, I haven't been looking at the chat box.
We haven't had questions yet about this particular topic, but we did have a question about whether or not we'd be offering training again for new and existing officers, to which I responded, yes, on May 30th. Stay tuned on exact times. I think that we said it was going to be from 10 to 12:30 on May 30th. It's a Saturday general training for financial officers and membership chairs, and we'll be doing another one later in the summer. And so that is coming up. And then I see, Lucia, you have your hand raised. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've been talking about elections at the board, and we have most of the really important positions covered, but we are lacking a president. That is very challenging in a school as Everett to recruit anyone. Our quorums are like incredibly limited. So my specific mention, Melissa, the 30-day announcement. Does it need to be really 30 days between you announce the slate and the elections take place? Is that a set in stone time?
Yeah, you need to, it'll be outlined in your bylaws specifically, but it gives everyone a chance to prepare, to calendar that so that they can be there if they want. It gives them a chance to perhaps even nominate themselves if they want, or someone else, so they can see what the incoming leadership is. So for transparency reasons, it's really a good idea to give that advance notice before your election. But if you've already, gone past the time of announcing your slate, that's okay. Like, you can still have your elections with the notice.
Yeah, I guess that the main reason why we haven't done the announcement is because we don't have a president. So
I would go ahead and announce who you do have, and if you even find someone before the time of the meeting, your nominating committee can report a revised slate. So they can just announce that there. You'll see when you look at capta.org, which gives you very clear, almost even a script for the elections, they will call for nominations from the floor for each and every officer role.
Okay, thank you.
And I wanted to also mention on this call that there are 3 officers that are required to be in good standing for your unit, and that's president, treasurer, and secretary. So those are the 3 big ones that you really need to have in order to remain a unit in good standing.
So sorry, I kind of like came to me. I wanted to follow up on your last reply. So I definitely cannot be a president next year. I was president at Alvarado. I'm going through too much, but I don't want for us to lose our PTA status. So if we really cannot find anyone, can I just, become president if I get elected or something like that? And immediately after the beginning of the year, if we find somebody, resign and get that person to take over?
Yeah, you were not 2 consecutive years already at Everett, right?
I have been in the board for more than 2 years. This is my 2nd year, but in different positions. I was parliamentarian first, and then this year, so
Okay.
I haven't been president since elementary school.
Then you could be president next year. You could be elected president, and if someone else, if you had to resign and they found someone else, it's in the bylaws, but your board, for any empty position, it's your board, your current board would fill that position.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
And that's related to another question that we have here in the chat box from Jessica that says, how do you elect new parents in the fall exactly? And can we wait to hold the election until the fall?
You shouldn't wait to hold the election just to include the new parents. You can still hold the election now. If there's vacant spots, then your board again would fill it. But if it's at all possible, there's several reasons you really want to hold your elections sooner than later. I mentioned this before on a previous call. And one reason is so that your new officers can attend the convention. But of course, this year we're not convening in that way. Another one is just for transition. So a lot of officers move out of the school, and so you want to have some transition between officers, the outgoing and the incoming. So it's really important to try to get the election done now, and then you can fill more vacant spots in the fall.
And I just wanted to add that if for some reason you can't fill those spots this year and you need to wait until the fall to see if there's anybody else available to fill, you can still make that a fairly inclusive process and let people know that there are certain positions that are open that you're looking for interested people to take. And they can somehow submit their interest to the board, and then the board can go ahead with their regular appointment process. So there is a way that it still can be very inclusive, even if you're into the point in your calendar where the board would be doing the appointment. There aren't other questions sitting here in the chat, but if there are others, please raise your hand or put them in the chat or unmute yourself. Wondering if you all are having any specific, has anybody had success taking any specific kind of tactics into recruiting new members? I can share one thing that I have found to be important at the schools that I've been at, is that letting people know that when you're trying to fill a position, in particular president, because they tend to do a lot of work, that you don't have to do the job the same way as the person before you. Sometimes people get intimidated because they're coming after somebody who was really involved and seemed to have more time than other people have. And you do not have to do things the same way other people did them. You get to do them according to what works for you, what works for your schedule. You are not required to be full-time volunteers. And so you can do things on your own scale, and that's enough, and that's okay. And so you don't need, so make clear to people when you're trying to recruit that they don't have to do things the same way somebody else did, and that if all they have to give is a couple of hours a week, it will be okay. And you will work with them, and this is a volunteer role, and your families and your jobs come first, and as much as you can give to the school, we will all appreciate. And so I have found that is really helpful approach to take with people who are feeling overwhelmed by the idea of leadership, yet still have a lot to offer.
Michelle, I'm remembering back about 10 years ago when you gave me that very sound advice, and I was recruited as a first grade parent to be PTA president.
I've used it obviously before. Now look, she's here. There's another question here in the chat. Can other board members do the job of auditor in the interim if we don't get one until fall? Which is, yes, you can appoint.
Yeah, and that's an important, one of those very important things not to let go. Along with taxes, I should have just actually mentioned the audit and the mid-year audit if you have that. Another thing we wanted, I know, to talk about, which I forgot to mention, was the PTA-EZ, and our treasurer sent an email about that out to some of the listservs today. It just reminds you that for new officers that we have a deadline of May 15th that you need to enter those new officers. And if you don't have access to PTA-EZ, you can contact Sally, our treasurer, and she will help you get a login for that.
Great. Okay, if there are any final questions, I'm going to scroll through and see if anybody raises their hand over here in the participant box. I do not see any hands raised. Yes.
Hi, this is Kagalon. I'm from Francis Scott Key, and I just had a quick question to follow up. So the PTA-EZ, that is, I'm a former board member at large, and I've been elected to be president for next year, and I'm trying to get ahead of the curve. So could you maybe elaborate, thank you, elaborate a little bit more on the EZ process or the EZ tool?
Sally or Terry want to take that?
Sure. So if you don't, anyone has access to PTA-EZ, you don't have to use their software package. And once you may already have a login. Once you log in, on the upper right-hand corner, there's a little, there's something called officers contacts, and you just click on that, and then you can enter all of the officers contact.
Okay. Got it. I mean, the current president may be already handling this. I'm not sure, but this is just news I haven't heard yet. So, okay, so it's a tool that we can pull from the CAPTA site?
The website is actually ptaez.com.
Oh, perfect. Okay. Thank you.
So if you haven't been there, you probably don't have a login. So just shoot me an email and I can create a login, and you just, once you get on the site, you just press login and you put in your login and password, and you'll be
Okay.
able to
Is
access
it a
the,
shared login for the school or is it per individual?
it's per individual.
Okay, I'll follow up. Excuse me. I'll follow up with the current pres and board members to see if we already have something, and maybe they're already in the act of doing it. Otherwise, Sally, I'll reach out to you directly. Thank you.
Sure.
And if any of you on this call are new officers for next year, you can reach out to the outgoing officers for if you have questions related to things like PTA EZ, and you can certainly reach out to Sally or anybody else. And I also just wanted to mention that we are going to do another one of these 411 meetings the day after school gets out. It gets out on a Tuesday, so the next day we're going to do one of these meetings specifically on transitioning officers and onboarding new officers. So watch out for that for both outgoing and incoming, so that you have an idea, get some support in that. So let's go ahead and move on to our next topic. And if you have anything else that comes up that was related to the topic we just covered, go ahead and put it in the chat and we'll capture it and answer it at some point. And I'm seeing one more question here. What is the auditor function and who can fill that role? Sally, could you actually answer that in the chat box, and we'll move on to the next topic?
Sure.
All right, so the next topic we're going to cover is building community online. We are in this crazy time where we can't see each other face to face, and we're trying to find virtual ways to connect. It's part of why we're doing this series. And so we would love to get ideas from you all about what's working for you and to share some of our ideas. And Albert Coe, our president of the 2nd District, is actually going to lead this part of our discussion. Take it away, Albert. Unmute yourself first.
Can you hear me now? Hello? Okay, great. So the strength in PTA is in our membership, and that has been our core ever since our beginning. So now we're switching gears to online. Okay, so different arena, different challenges, but let's pivot and take advantage of what Zoom and the tools that we have right now. Outreach is number one, of course, and you want to reach out to everyone possible. Word of mouth is best. You're going to see little clicks form in the school, people who share common threads. Use those small communities and spread the word. Work with the principal of the school, you know, that way you can reach out to as many people as you can. Number one thing is find something that resonates with the community. Pick hot topics, and then that just, you know, resonates with people, and that draws them in. For example, our 411 Wednesdays is a great example. We've had important issues that resonate with people. Funding. People call in because it's important to them, and you know, it resonates, it draws people in. So when you have topics that people are interested in, you don't have to, you know, make them come. They will come themselves. So that old saying, if you build it, they will come. That is so true. That's what we do when we meet in person, when we have big meetings at school. We're just shifting the format a little, and we're drawing them online. Same principle. And that's kind of like the main gist of it. Of course, there's nuances. I'll take questions now if anyone has any.
What all, I bet that some of you are having some great success at your schools. And Albert, weren't you guys having some success also at CIS? Do I remember that?
Yes. Going back to CIS. Oh, am I? Yeah. Going back to CIS elementary. Of course, number one, elementary school, a lot of positive energy. The old saying, never let a good crisis go to waste. that was what we did. We leveraged the situation of, hey, schools, schools out, and we still have to educate our kids. Here's how we're going to do it. We have to come together as a community, and that just pulls people in. And it's just, finding that common thread of what is important to people. And that's an easy one. Kids' education. How can we support them? Tune in tonight and find out what we can do. We're taking everyone's ideas. And that's what it's all about. That's what PTA is all about. Everyone does a little, and it adds up to a lot.
Go ahead and raise your hand in the participant box if you have some things that have been working for you all at your school. I wanted to make a couple other suggestions. I think what I'm seeing a lot is parents craving information and connection with their school communities. Some schools are having a lot of communication from their administration, and some are not. And so you could invite your principal to do a chat, something like Zoom meeting or something else related to that that works for you all, and have them just do Q&A on what things are happening in the school and how they can support. You could do some sort of actually I participated a couple of weeks ago in a really fun kind of TikTok talent show thing. It was like an hour long with a community where people submitted really short 90-second long talents that they just pre-recorded and then sent, and everybody did them sort of on a live Zoom meeting, and we're sharing special talents, which could be really fun for actually any level. You could do it as families in elementary school, or in middle or high school. You could have like a student kind of talent thing, but just fun, so people aren't having to do crazy serious things, but it's a way to connect with your community. And you could find some way to connect with people in common service. So if there's something that's important to your school community, you could put out that service opportunity to people. And so even if they're not doing it together, you could all be joining in a common cause sort of at asynchronous times, or pick some day that people are socially distant and volunteering at the food bank, or things like that. I think there are ways to get creative about things that are important to your own school community. So I'm curious if anybody has something that they've tried that worked, or even if you tried something that didn't work, share what that is.
Yeah, and just to add to that, commonalities is super key. And you're going to get different commonalities in every group of schools. For example, elementary schools have different things that are important. Fundraising is huge. Middle school topics, for our parents, might be something different. Like bullying is a serious topic that gets a lot of attention because when they go into the tween years, they go into a different social arena. Hanging out with mom and dad ain't cool anymore. How can we connect with our kids and support them? And then, let's get a group together, and that's an important topic. And high school, another different arena. Parents are even less involved, a lot more independence to the kids. Now we're looking at career planning for the kids, or which colleges to go to, where should we get testing support, get a high SAT score, more serious topic, teen pregnancies, things like that, more socially involved issues, things that concern people, drug addictions, even more serious bullying, online bullying. These are some of the things that resonate with people, and people want to get together and share ideas. And so depending on which stage your child is in, it comes with different issues, and touch on those topics, because if it concerns you, it probably concerns someone else too. Use the PTA as a media to pull people in together and problem solve together, and form groups and committees, and take some action, advocate for your kids. And that's why PTA is here. We're an advocacy organization.
Thanks, Albert. There's some good ideas in there. Linda, do you want to share something?
Sure. I'm at Miraloma, and we've had a lot of success having teachers come to our meetings pre-COVID and talk about what the kids are learning, and even doing some fun kind of Common Core activities with parents, doing sample lessons. I think, it works well maybe for elementary school. But one thing I really noticed, it's been almost shocking, is that since we've been having our PTA meetings online, our attendance has probably tripled. I think we had 100 people at our last meeting, and that was because I had a limit I didn't know about on my Zoom account. And I'm wondering, if you've been talking to CAPTA at all. We have found we've been able to be much more inclusive of people who just, work multiple jobs, just don't have lots of kids, don't have a lot of time, are just working parents, and the Zoom format. And we'd really like to continue that for at least some meetings next year. So I was just wondering if there's any, if anyone's talking to CAPTA about sort of this need, or, again, the ability to be more inclusive through virtual meetings.
Well, I wanted to say that even if CAPTA doesn't change their rules right away about association meetings, having conference calls and video calls, you can still do that with the permission of the people in the room and that are participating. But they just wouldn't be able to vote, so they can still be included in the information, hearing from the teachers, things like that you're meaning. But I'm not sure if anyone else has been speaking with CAPTA or heard anything that this is might continue. So
I'm not sure if anybody else has, but I also just wanted to make sure that we're setting some expectation around what some of the health orders might still be when we get into the fall. Because we don't have a vaccine yet, I think that we should all be expecting that having a meeting that has 50 people in one room is not likely to be encouraged when we go back to school in August or September. And so I think we're probably going to be looking at some more long-term solutions. And certainly next year, I'm seeing a lot about expecting blended learning experiences. Maybe we'll go in and out of having in-person and remote learning, just depending. We just don't know what things look like yet. And so I think we will probably still see some of this, and we'll hopefully continue to hear direction from CAPTA on what to expect. But I would guess that our first couple meetings in the fall will still need to be remote, just because of the number of people in one room probably won't be encouraged yet that we might generally see at our PTA meetings. Excuse me. A couple things here in the chat. We would like to know how can we continue to do some meetings via Zoom next year, which we sort of just addressed there. And then there was another idea from Melissa, other virtual fun ideas, creating a Kahoot trivia game, invite community, ask librarian if they can do an occasional read aloud for the school. We have one here from Gina. At the elementary PTO level, we've been having our meeting on Facebook Live with the participants' permission. And then, good question from Shelley, how will approving the budget be impacted if meetings are virtual? Great question. I don't know if we know the answer to that. Albert, do you know?
Yeah, we did this over at CIS, and we shared a screen. And we talked about just what we're doing right now, share the screen and go over numbers. It's a little awkward, but it can be done.
Okay. All right, I think that I caught, there's been some talk in the chat box that maybe I'll just address quickly in case, because I know some people are on the phone and can't see the chat box. About actually, let's see. This is just follow up to that from Shelley. You have to see everyone who votes and know that they are members, right? So this is a question really for Melissa.
Yeah, I actually was on a CAPTA call a couple weeks ago where they addressed that a bit. So if you should do a roll call and to make sure you have your quorum, and if there is anything that's contentious where it's not, obvious ayes carry for the motion, you will need to check your membership list. If for some reason you don't have your membership list or you don't have access to it, then everyone present gets to vote. I heard Capta say that. So.
Great, thank you. And then, like I said, just because not everybody can see a chat box because some people might be from calling into the meeting, I just wanted to let everybody know the answer to this question. There was some talk about audits and what the auditor function is and who can fill that role. This is unrelated to the current topic, but it was related to the last one. Anyone who's not related to the check signers can be an auditor. The new requirement to have an audit committee, which is more than one person to perform the audit, unless the auditor is a financial professional. And then there was a question about when the rule was implemented and asking how big the audit committee needs to be and are there any requirements for its formation or composition. And Sally responded, the audit committee requirement is new this year and at least 2 people on the committee. Auditors can be appointed by the president or the elected president. All right. And then the last couple of comments here in the chat. What qualifies as a financial professional? A CPA or a banker profession? Sally, do you want to answer that?
It doesn't say that they actually have to be a CPA, but I think somebody who's been working in a financial role for, like the last 10 years would qualify as a financial professional.
Thank you. All right, and then does a budget need to be approved and voted on before the end of the year? No, we'll be talking about provisional budgets in just a few minutes, so hold on to that question. We'll talk about that shortly. All right, just the last couple of comments here. Ideas for building community over the summer, suggestions for welcoming new families. You can't do play dates in the same way. So this is particularly relevant to elementary schools, which so many of will hold those new kindergarten play dates and things. Does anybody have any ideas that they've already come up with for their elementary schools about how to tackle that community building that often happens during the summer in a different way?
We've tried virtual happy hour, and we've invited a group of parents, and I can't see why we can't do it to the new incoming parents, and then whether they choose to join in or not, it's up to them. But again, throw out an important topic of welcome to our school, and we're a great school, and we want to meet you so you could be part of our community, and happy hour is just to chat and meet, quote, face to face, but not really, but face to face discussion, just to touch base and meet before we get school going. And we've done that in a couple of places, and that seemed to pull people in. Of course, nothing is as good as the real thing, but it's convenient too. You could join in from anywhere. So that's a plus.
Just one quick thing. I'm going to have just a couple last comments here, and then I want us to move on to the next topic. One thing that I think we will find a challenge is that once school starts, you can get contact information for families, but you may not have people's emails before school starts if they're brand new kindergarten families. And so that'll be something I have to figure out ways to address. Sharon has her hand raised. Sharon, do you want to share something?
Yes, I'm sorry my video is off, but I have a very unstable connection, so I'm trying to minimize all of that. I think Shelley had mentioned, and a few other people, about adopting a family. So traditionally, what I did at Alamo prior to the summer during the registration process is we were able to collect the incoming family's email and put them on a dedicated listserv that there were officers and or parents who had younger siblings who were coming into the K class on board, so that parents had a way of asking questions if they weren't able to go to a summer play date, or in this particular class, no one will be able to go to a face-to-face play date. But that there's communication that is flowing amongst that population, because if one person has the question, chances are somebody either A, also has it, or B, they didn't even think of that, and the information is going. At school, we also talked about perhaps creating a buddy system so that each new family has basically like a big brother, big sister family, hopefully with a parent of a K, with a K student who can basically be their go-to in the event they have questions. And the rapport would have started over the summer through the virtual play dates, so that they have somebody that they can actually ask, because this whole remote situation for them in an elementary school setting is going to be totally different, where we have spent the last month or two adapting to it. It's going to be a whole new experience for them as they're coming in. It's going to be quite scary, and this way, some of their fears can be allayed, or if they bring up concerns or maybe perhaps ideas that they were able to overcome in their preschool. It's helpful information so that they're able to already have a voice. And people who voice, what I found is people who voice opinions and or share ideas are going to be a great PTA volunteer.
Thanks, Sharon. And you're right, there are several comments here in the chat box about forming some sort of a buddy system. And before we, I know I need to turn the light on. Before we move on, I actually have this question about, there's a question here in the chat box about collecting emails before starting school. And since we don't have in-person registration at school sites anymore, how, somebody can enlighten me, is there a way to collect emails? Now that we're not at a school site collecting emails when people come to register?
Okay. Michelle?
Yeah, Shelley.
Well, everybody registered with the EPC, but if you can reach out to your secretary who can has the email addresses, because when the district did this remote registration, they collected that, except for people who mailed in their acceptance, who might not have provided it. And the secretary can tell people that there's a group they can join, because yes, you're protecting it. In Sharon's other example, when people would register, there'd be a sign up for the PTA kindergarten group. But an alternate method would be for the secretary to send a message to those families, directing them to the group.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense, because we want to make sure people are opting in and we're not just automatically taking people's information. So there might be a way for the school to collect. They can collect their information, but they can say, if you would like to be part of the communication with the parent group, with the PTA, that they can, there's a couple ideas here in the chat about doing that. So that's great. We're going to move on to our last topic. And I am going to turn a light on in my dining room here as soon as I introduce it. We're going to be talking about creating provisional budgets for next year. And we've got a couple of people from our board, Terry Norbury and then Sally, who you were just hearing from, who are going to talk about what the heck a provisional ballot is and why do you want one, why do people use them, just give you a little bit of information. And then I'm guessing that you all will have questions about it, but if you also have ideas and insight, then you're free to share those, and just same thing, put questions in the chat or raise your hand and we'll catch you as soon as they finish talking about this initial part.
Okay, this is Terry Norbury. Am I unmuted? Does anybody hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to talk about the budget, and just a little background. I know it's late in the year and you guys all know about budgets, but just as a reminder type of thing, the budget is the planning document for your PTA, and it essentially sets out what all of you agree to, because it's voted upon, all of you agree to do during the year in the way of raising money and spending money. So it's the starting point for your activities in the year. The main budget is approved in the first meeting in September, and it is probably the most important thing that the board gets ready for that first PTA meeting. It's important that the budget be approved so that you can proceed to spend the money. You're not allowed to spend the money until you have a budget and approve the spending of the money. So that's essentially, the budget is a key to your activities. At the end of the year, it is a lot of the units that are active and will have expenses that must be paid during the summer months between the end of this year and before the beginning of next year. They will have the new incoming board create a budget for the next year, and that budget would be presented to the existing board and to the general membership meeting, the last meeting of the year. And that was essentially set out what the new board expects the budget to be next year. Part of that activity, and the important part of that activity, is that the board approve or release the funds that have to be spent during the summer months. So I'll go on through this and you can ask questions, because there's undoubtedly going to be some questions. There are two ways for money expenditures to be approved. One is for it to be released ahead of time through a vote of the members' meeting. And the other one is for it to be, the expenditure to be ratified after the fact. So the preferred way is to have it released ahead of time and approved. So in the last meeting, general meeting of the year, you would approve the release of the funds that will be necessary to be spent during the summer months. That provisional ballot, or not ballot, budget that is presented at the final meeting would be looked at again during the summer and brought forward for a vote of adoption in the September meeting. So that would be the basis upon which you'd make your budget for September. And so that's the overview of the provisional budget. It's simply a matter of getting ready for the next year. It's probably not very important at all for a unit that isn't expecting to spend money during the summer, but it is very important for those units that do expect to have to spend money during the summer, and this authorizes the writing of those checks and sending the money out. So I'll take questions at this point. I'm sure I've raised some issues, but what does this raise in your mind for questions?
There's one question here from Jill at Dolores Huerta. It says, if you're including a position or a program in your budget, how can you wait to have it approved at the first meeting?
I'm not exact. Could you read that again? Don't get that.
Actually, Jill, do you want to unmute yourself and you can ask it?
Sure. So I guess the question is, like in our budget, for example, we have a part-time staff position or like a program we have to commit to. Like if we don't, we've always approved our budget at the end of the school year. So if we're doing it in the first meeting, if it doesn't get approved, like we would have already had to kind of like commit to those programs or positions ahead of time.
Right. Well, you're right in the middle of the provisional budget. So what you've been approving under the control of the outgoing board is a provisional budget and releasing the money to be spent during the summer. The budget for the next year, starting for most units in July, would be adopted by the general membership in September. And it could look exactly like the provisional budget that you looked at in May or June, but it has to come in and be approved by the membership next year. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. So like anything that the provisional budget approved, and then those things already were committed to, like you said, if you have to pay over the summer, then that's kind of already a done deal. The budget in the fall can't kind of take those back.
Sounds like you got it, and that's
Okay.
the answer, yeah.
Thank you.
Right, it goes back to sort of the, I guess, rule that each board and each group of members each year has control over all of the money that is left over from the prior year and the money that they raised during that year. And so it has to be, their plan has to be approved. And then once it's approved, the budget's adopted, then each time you want to spend money, you either release the funds through a vote at the general meeting, or if that doesn't happen, and most times you just ratify all the checks with a vote of the members in a meeting following the expenditure. Okay, any other questions?
There was a question earlier that I think that may have been answered, but I want to ask. Angela from Rosa Parks asked if a budget needed to be approved and voted on before the end of the year, but I think that we have addressed that. But Angela, you can either put a message in the chat or actually unmute yourself and ask, but I think you probably got it answered. Yep, all good. Okay, great. I don't see other questions sitting here in the chat, but some of you must have questions. Anything else budget related that you want to understand this year related to the provisional budget, or anything else happening this year or over the summer you'd like to understand better?
I'd like to make another point that this is sort of rule-based, but you know, we're all trying to keep our own PTA going properly. There is another important document that you need to be very much on top of, and that is the minutes of your general meeting. The minutes of your general meeting need to recite that you have approved the budget, you know, when you're doing the budget, and it needs to recite the votes that are taken to release funds, the votes that are taken to ratify the checks that have been written, and votes that are taken to adopt the programs that you're going through. Actually, the last thing, the adopting the program, is reflected in adopting the budget, so it's sort of redundant. But the reason that it's important that these votes get recorded in the minutes of the meeting is that is how we ensure that the PTA insurance covers the activities that we undertake. One of the first questions that the PTA insurance carrier will ask if we file a claim for somebody tripping and falling, or somebody running off with money, whatever the insurance covers, is show us your minutes and show us that this actually was a PTA event. So be sure that not only are you taking the votes, but that they're recorded in the minutes, and you preserve the minutes and have them reviewed and filed appropriately. More rules, important rules.
Thank you, Terry. And there's another couple of questions here. Slightly off topic, is there any guidance about how to treat PTA reserves? Should they be spent down or can they be saved given the uncertainty in funding in the future? And it looks like Melissa started to answer this, but I'll just see if there's anything else to add to this. Is CAPTA recommends being cautious this year because finances next fiscal year are uncertain. Current PTA guidelines recommend unrestricted reserves should not exceed 50% of the association's budget for an average year. That seems to answer it. Is there anything else? Linda, did that answer it for the most part for you? Or if there are other questions related to that? You can unmute yourself if you want to add anything. Okay, you got it. Okay, good. Okay, let's see. There, no fixed amount required. Okay, great. And then do the actual number of votes need to be recorded? Nobody answered that. I don't think we need to have actual number of votes recorded. You just need to, if it's unanimous, just write that it's unanimous. And if there are, the number doesn't matter. I think it's percentage, right? But we want to have a majority.
The number does not matter. And
right.
So
you just want to record that it passed. So you want to record that a motion was made, that it was seconded, and that the motion passed.
All votes are majority except for changes to the standing rules, which are 2/3 of the
two-thirds, right. So that's all you need to have listed in your minutes. All right, let's see. Other comments in here. For equity reasons, it's good practice to align spending to the group that helps generate the funds. All right, does that make sense to everybody? It's the group who's voting and making decisions about how to use PTA funds is the same group that helped raise the funds during, for the most part. And then Albert adds here, the rule of thumb on how much to save in the PTA reserves is about 50% of the operating budget.
Yeah, the PTA rules, I don't believe actually have even the 50% number in there. It's very vague. That is understood, I think, among just a chattering crowd that is appropriate for a PTA that spends a lot of money because they have big activities and they may be supporting a lot of things at the school. The actual number can be higher, and it probably would be higher in times like this where fundraising activities may not be as available next year as they have been this year. And it isn't something that there's any police that come along and look at you and say, you got to spend this stuff. The most would be that if Sally looks at your budget and says, hey, you got too much in reserves, you got to figure out how to spend these charitable funds on charitable purposes, not stack them up in your bank account. So.
Thanks, Terry. And Shelley adds, since we don't know how well our communities will be able to raise funds going forward, that 50% would be based on the prior year's budget. I also just want to acknowledge we have lots of PTAs that there's just no way they can have 50% more than they spend in a year. It's really hard to raise money at many of our PTAs. So I just want to acknowledge that too. There are some general great accounting processes and just best practices, but just because that's a good idea, we recognize you might not be able to do that. You may be able to raise just what you raised this year and you spend it this year, and that's how your PTA works, and that is also okay. So just wanted to acknowledge that. All right, we're getting close to finishing up here. If you have anything else, raise your hand or unmute yourself for the good of the order.
I'd like to.
Yes,
I'd like
please,
to
Terry.
say something more, and this is back to the middle topic that we had about community raising. I think people should consider Ed 100. There are a lot of lessons in there, and there are a lot of topics that new parents would be very interested in about how schools run, concerns about bullying and so forth, all sorts of things about budgeting and funding and so forth. So you can take a lesson and make that the topic of a chat or a Zoom meeting and have that sort of the focus as a way to structure a meeting and get people interested. They can all read it ahead of time and have something to say about it.
Thanks, Terry. I think that's a great idea. And that also could be a fun community building activity to do over the rest of these few weeks, is sort of do it like an Ed 100 book club type activity, you know, where everybody goes through a chapter or two, you know, in a week and gets on some call to talk about what they've learned. It's super accessible information. The language is not overly complex and academic, which is really helpful because very few people understand to that degree. So thank you for that. And I posted that link in the chat box. Couple final housekeeping things and we are going to end. Sharon reminds me that all of these 411 Wednesday meetings have been recorded so far, and we will keep recording them. And we have a new page on our website, sfpta.org, where those links can be found. Also, if you go to YouTube, you can look up 2nd District PTA. We have a brand new channel, and you'll find all of the meetings there. Please share them with current and new officers who haven't seen them, because they can go review those sessions and learn the information they've seen. And let's see. I have a couple of notes that I've gotten from people here that I want to let you know about. I don't know, Melissa just asked me if district employees can be PTA officers. I believe that they can. I don't think they are allowed to be treasurers of PTAs. I don't know if anybody else can confirm that, but to my remembrance, district employees cannot be treasurers.
Can't sign a check.
They cannot sign checks, right? They cannot sign checks, but they can be officers of PTAs. That is fine.
Right, so if they were the president, they would not be a signator.
Right. They would have to have like the VP or somebody else be a signator. That's exactly correct. And then, so one more reminder about next week, we're going to be doing the town hall with our state legislators. I've already sent out that link, but I'll send it out again. And then the last thing I wanted to let you know that I will be sending out a survey to you maybe tonight, maybe tomorrow. I asked before about information about how your PTA budgets have been impacted by school closures. Many of you filled that survey out at the beginning of the school closures, and I'm going to be sending out a new survey to get updated information on what you're seeing the impact of these closures are to your fundraising budget. So I'll be asking things like, have you met your revenue goals for your PTA? And if you haven't, by how much and what's going to happen as a result of not meeting those, because the district just doesn't have a clear picture on how much our PTAs financially support our schools sometimes, and therefore directly impact our students. And so I want to gather that information, and I won't be identifying schools individually when I share that information with the district. I'll be doing it as a group, unless you explicitly give me permission to mention your school. If there's something that you feel is important to share specifically about your school, just to let you know that. So watch for that shortly, and I'll give you probably about 3 days to complete it. You probably have a pretty good handle on where your finances are at the moment. So watch for that. And we've got some other great 411 meetings coming up after this town hall. The next 3 are planned, but I'm waiting for confirmation on speakers before they announce them, but they're exciting. They'll be good and hopefully useful to you all. Anything else before we close? Okay. Thank you all so much for joining us. The YouTube channel, just go to YouTube. Go to 2nd District PTA on YouTube, and you will or go to YouTube and search 2nd District PTA, and you'll find our channel, but you'll also find out on the sfpta.org website. Okay, thanks everybody.
Thank you, everybody. It was very helpful.
You're all unmuted if you want to say anything. Thank you.
Bye, thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. They will.